Hey, it's Les from Northwoods. Had a lot of interest in our survey in finding out how each and different species turn. One of the things that I've done with this question is ask some of the experts that I know, my mentors, my teachers, and then some of it's from my own experience in turning each one of these woods. I like to actually dive in and turn a bowl or turn a box or something out of the wood that I'm selling because I want to know how it reacts too, because if I've got to answer your question, I've got at least some experience with it. So one of the first things I want to talk about is wood movement. Some woods move more than others. Some green woods move more than if they were dry. Some species, depending on their density, will either be very hard or very soft, which also factors into how much they move and how they turn. One of the primary answers to how to turn almost any wood, especially the domestic woods we have here in the United States, is sharp tools and turn fast. I've seen a lot of demonstrations from a lot of great names, great turners, great masters in the craft. Most of them will say that between 1500 and 1800 RPMs is kind of a consistent number. I've heard from some of them when they're past the roughing stage. Usually at the roughing stage, maybe 700 to 1000 RPMs is a good rule of thumb. Some use scrapers, some use bowl gouges, some use a myriad of different tools. It just depends on how you're approaching it and what you're actually making as to which tool you're going to use. And I'm not probably the expert in knowing those kind of tools and what is available and the best ones in the market and all that, but I do have some nice tools and have my own way of doing things based on my experience and the things that I like to turn. So what we're going to start today with is big leaf maple. Big leaf maple is what predominantly we have here in the Northwest. We have burl big leaf maple. We also have quilted figure, fiddleback figure, which on the East Coast they call tiger maple or tiger stripe maple. Fiddleback generally refers to the idea that they use that kind of material, or the fiddleback, for the back of a violin or a guitar. We also have a quilted figure, which is I think probably my favorite of all the figures in all the woods that I've seen. But that's my own bias. So you'll notice this particular bowl is big leaf maple. It's actually, if you look at the growth rings, it's somewhat rift sawn, but also part of it is actually quarter sawn, meaning that the growth rings are going 90 degrees from the surface of the top of the bowl and the bottom of the bowl. This particular piece, if you look real closely, you'll see that it actually has oblonged a little bit and moved. Maple moves kind of, I would say, medium once it's dry, in a medium range where it doesn't distort drastically, but it will probably move. The higher the figure, I find, the more the movement. Unless it's completely dry, if you're turning green, you're going to have some movement. I'm a little bit impatient when I turn, so I always kind of push it a little bit, and I want to see a finished product because I usually have a very limited amount of time to turn. So I'll go ahead and finish it all the way, and then if it moves, it moves, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. So when you get a block like this, you can see it's got some figure in it. This particular bowl, it's kind of a similar figure. If you can see the kind of a curly aspect. This is probably from my guess would be some kind of a crotch area or a tension area that causes that kind of figure. This bowl or this block is very dry, so I would expect it to move less than this bowl did. As far as turnability, this big leaf maple is soft enough that it actually will tear out some, but usually not so bad that you can't sand it out pretty well. It works wonderfully, especially with sharp tools. You can see that this particular one doesn't have any tear out on it. So this big leaf maple, as far as turnability, I would say I'd rate it, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it about a 7 or 8 as far as ease to work with, and maybe even put it up in the 8 or 9 category, just because of its density. If it was a little harder, it'd probably be even a little bit more easy. And that's on the figured maple. Other than maple burl. Maple burl I would put maybe 9 or 10 because the grain pattern is so random. It doesn't have a specific end grain. It's like either it's all end grain or it's all long grain, and it's so confused that it doesn't know what to do probably. So it tends to be a lot more forgiving. This particular bowl is a maple burl. This would be how it would grow. These pins would be on the vertical side of the burl. These rays will go back towards the center of the tree. So with burl you can get two different looks. Like I said, a vertical cut this way, or a horizontal cut this way where you get more rays. This particular bowl is a cast of acrylic cast onto a piece of maple burl, and you'll see that the eyes, or the pins that show from a vertical cut on the outside of the burl, which would be the same as this figure like that. So I would say that maple burl is very easy to turn. Again, like any other, you need sharp tools and need to turn it fairly quickly. Now, in turning a natural edge bowl like this, there's several things you want to pay attention to. One is you want to finish the outside completely to get it exactly the way you want it. I'd even sand it if it was me, because what happens on these natural edges, they have a tendency to want to move as you're actually cutting them, especially if they're green. If they're dry, not quite so much, but if it's green especially, you want to finish as you go. These pins and these edges are very sharp. You want to make sure you keep your fingers out of the way. I know that from experience, unless you want a nasty little abrasion. So what I like to do is I will take this bowl in, I'll turn it so that I've actually show the whole top edge of this natural edge, and I'll actually finish maybe a ½ inch to an inch at a time, and then I will go ahead and sand it and finish it as I go, and then go a little deeper, because what the meat of the wood will support this outside edge. If you take too much off, then this tends to want to distort or shrink or move, and then it's almost impossible to sand it, in my experience. So then I just slowly finish it all the way into the bottom, making sure that everything is as smooth and where I want to do. And then there's still room for some final sanding, but generally these bowls will move a little bit more than the average. But it's as you can see, it's a very nice look. I love the natural edge, actually. So what we start with, we'll take for that bowl over there, of course it's a little bigger piece, but I'll take a piece like this and then make that into a round, and then I'll just have that natural edge will be these pins sticking up all the way around it, or around the top edge of it. So and we do sell burl caps anywhere from, around this size to, I think we have some that are maybe 3 or 4 feet in diameter. So the next one I want to talk about is black walnut. Black walnut, I like to turn green. I actually prefer to turn green because I think it turns well. It's harder than maple. It's got some properties that you need to be aware of. One is that black walnut is a skin sensitizer, and it can be somewhat of a health risk. You want to make sure you wear dust masks and eye shields with it. Again, you want also to have sharp tools and turn at a pretty decent speed. Black walnut is one, if you're going to turn it green, you want to turn it all the way to its finished size. It doesn't generally work well to, say, rough it out and then set it back and let it dry and then come back to it. For whatever reason, I have more success if I turn it completely to the finished product that I want. It doesn't crack as much, it doesn't move quite as much. Why that is, I have no idea. My mentor was the one that showed me that, and it works 9 times out of 10. This is the size of block basically that you would get something like this out of. You can see that, you know, this is a 3x3 by about 6 inches long. Black walnut doesn't tear out. I don't have any issues with that. Spalting is part of the decaying process. This fungus, this black line, is predominant in a lot of spalting, and it's basically that fungus is claiming this, whatever's inside of this area that is completely surrounded, as their food base, and they'll go from there and work towards the center, and then pretty soon the wood is all the sugars, all the proteins, all the starches are taken out of it, and it just becomes mush for the most part. You want to really pay attention to how you turn it. Again, still sharp tools, higher speed, but as you go, you're going to want to take some kind of material. I use a 1 pound shellac or a 2 pound that's been thinned down, and use it as a sanding sealer or a fortifier, and as it's turning, I'll brush it on and let it sit overnight and come back to it and then sand it, finish the outside, and then go to the inside, and that tends to work pretty good. It becomes pretty hard surface after doing that. Sometimes it's 1 coat, sometimes it's 3 or 4 coats. It's just a longer process. You do, as you can see here, I have a little bit of tear out. You're going to have a lot of that with this kind of material. Sometimes the tear out can be significant. Sometimes it's actually a nice little feature. Also, want to really be careful about wearing a dust mask with this, because there is fungus growing in it and mold, and you want to be protecting yourself however you have to. This is a kind of the raw look to spalted material. This particular piece we would take slices out of, 1-inch slices to make pin blanks out of, and we usually take this material and have it acrylically stabilized for pins. This is a piece of madrone, Pacific madrone. Believe it or not, this piece was perfectly round when I turned it, and within 48 hours it moved this much, and it stopped moving and has been stable ever since. Why, I don't know, but madrone is kind of synonymous for that. It has a tendency to have moisture or water in the fibers of a green tree. I think what I've heard is it's 2 to 1, 2 parts water, 1 part wood fiber, which tends, at least in our area, which is Oregon. Northern California, Southern Oregon, the material is not nearly as high in moisture and tends to be a little more stable, but this is a good example of if you want something to move, a madrone is the one to get. However, once madrone is stabilized and dry, it's very stable and moves very little. This is a piece of madrone burl that was boiled for I don't know how many hours, and this particular bowl nothing has been done to it since I turned it, which was in 2010 or 2011, I'm not sure. But this, you can see, is perfectly round. There's very little distortion at all. So if you buy Madrone and it's already dry, you're going to have a very stable product. This particular material turns really well. It polishes up to a shine that's absolutely stellar. This has a shellac sanding sealer and then a lacquer finish on the outside of it, and that's all I've done to it. You can see it's dulled up a little bit. I take it to shows and it's seen a lot of hands handling it, but Madrone is a very nice one to turn if it's dry. Next one I'm going to show you is Black Locust. This is typically what you'll see if you get a block from us. This the brownish tint to it is the wax coating on the top of this. It tends to be a lot more of a green tint. It's a very dense, very hard wood. It turns really well. Again, sharp tools, fast speed. You can turn a piece out of a green piece of Black Locust and finish it all the way, and there's very, very little movement. It's actually a pretty stable wood. This one actually was turned by a friend of mine, and I don't know how long ago, several years probably. Has a nice sheen to it. You almost don't even need to sand it. You can get your tools, if you're at the right speed, you can get this to shine with just a tool finish. And of course, hitting it with sandpaper always makes it look even better, but it goes to a very nice finish. Next one I'm going to show you, I don't have a bowl, but this is a piece of white oak, and you can see this white oak was harvested or milled about a year ago, so you can see how it's shrunk tremendously. White oak is kind of synonymous for that. It likes to move and warp a lot as it's drying. However, once it's dry, it's very stable. It will give you tails that are just amazing, the chips going out. But when it's dry, it becomes very hard, and you need to. If I haven't emphasized sharp tools, this would be the one that if they aren't sharp, you'll definitely know it, and you probably sharpen your tool more with this and something like the Black Locust than you will with the maple or any of the others, because it's a very dense wood. That was a square block when I started, and you can see how it's distorted and gone out of square, and you can see the edges here. These were square and they've shrunk. These two pieces are, this is wild cherry that we have commonly here in the Northwest. It's not a wood that I normally stock, but it's a very common kind of a brush tree, where if you have a large stand of trees, there's generally some wild cherries. They don't produce much in the way of fruit that's extremely edible. The seed's bigger than the fruit part. But anyway, this was turned green, and out of a log section like this. So this is all natural edge, and it hasn't moved very much. It has moved some. You can see that the tenon on the bottom has oblonged longer this way than it is this way, but it's held its shape fairly well. And this is a piece of dry cherry. This is a domestic cherry. And this one, you can see, hasn't moved much at all. It also, like the other wild cherry, it finishes off as well as, say, the Madrone or the Black Locust. Very nice to work with. I love to turn it. This just has a thin shellac sanding sealer with the spray lacquer over the top of it, and again, this has been handled a lot, and you can see it's got a little bit of a dull finish, but but it actually doesn't have any sanding marks. It doesn't tear out very bad at all. It's very nice. We do get this in from time to time. So it's a great wood to turn. This is California Buckeye. I personally have not turned this, but I talked to several people that I respect that have turned it before. It's softer than maple, and it has a tendency to tear out. So what you want to make sure you do, again with sharp tools and faster speed, tear out is pretty high with this, but it does finish out nice. Might have to sand it more just because of the grain has a tendency to be a little stringy, I've heard. Very beautiful product in the end though. One of the things you want to be really careful with Buckeye burl is that it is a root burl, so you want to make sure that you are looking for sand or rocks or other things that may be lurking in the middle. There could be a bark inclusion or a rock in the center of this. We don't know. I've actually experienced some granite stones about the size of a silver dollar that are enclosed. You can't even see them. So one thing to be really aware of with this. Also, this blue stain with the Buckeye is something that occurs as it's aging once it's out of the ground. When it comes out of the ground, it's this color, and this blue stain develops. Generally, it takes about a year to 18 months for that blue stain to actually happen. So if you're looking for Buckeye and talking to somebody over the phone, you might mention, I really want the blue stain, so I want something that's a year old or even 2 years old would be really good. In California, where this wood is harvested, it doesn't hurt it to sit out because there's very little humidity. The rainfall is so low that the wood dries out quite well, and actually probably too fast in some cases. But it's that's what to look for with Buckeye burl. Silver maple is a little bit softer than big leaf maple. It's has a tendency to have a stringiness to it as you're turning it. It tends to have a lot of tear out, but it does sand fairly well. This one, I think I got a little tear out here, maybe a little here, but all in all, it does finish out pretty well. You probably have to do a little more work to it, a little more effort into it to make it, but it does finish nice. This is a piece of spalted silver maple where you can see that it's got a lot of different colors in it. I'm not sure where the purple comes from, but it's quite nice to turn. We have a little bit of box elder. Box elder tends to be real similar, I would say, to silver maple in that it's a softer maple. It tends to want to tear out, so you want to again have really sharp tools. It does sand out nice. If you turn it green, especially in the bigger bowls, it will move. But this is one that if you rough turn it 1/10 the size of whatever the diameter of the bowl is, set it aside and dry it and come back and turn it, then it'll be fairly stable like most of the maples. It does move. If you turn it all the way down to its finished product green, it will move. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. Feel free to contact us either by phone or email, and go turn.